Norway has 5 million people, less than the population of Minnesota. Yet it controls $1.7 trillion in wealth, more wealth per citizen than almost any nation on Earth. How did a country this small become this rich? Most people think Norway got lucky with oil beneath the seabed. A geological lottery ticket, and that's partly true about their story. In 1969, Phillips Petroleum discovered the Ekofisk field in the North Sea. The North Sea became an energy vault overnight for this small nation. But here's what doesn't make sense about this entire story. Dozens of countries found oil: Venezuela, Nigeria, Angola, Iraq, Libya. They didn't become Norway. They became poorer, more unstable, more dependent. So the question isn't why Norway has oil beneath its territory. It's why Norway didn't lose everything because of it like others did. Because oil destroys countries more often than it saves them. It creates corruption, inflation, dependency, and eventual collapse. Economists call this the resource curse, and it's well documented. Countries with abundant natural resources often perform worse than countries without them. They grow slower, become less stable, and end up poorer over time. Norway should have fallen into this trap like everyone else did, but it didn't. And the reason why changes everything about wealth. In 1990, Norway did something most governments can't do at all. It said, no, not to the oil, but to the money itself. The government created a sovereign wealth fund, not a budget or reserve. A fund that couldn't be touched by politicians or emergencies or elections. Every single krone from oil sales went into this fund immediately. Not into roads, not into salaries, not into campaigns or subsidies, into global investments, stocks, bonds, real estate across 70 different countries. The rule was simple: spend no more than 3% of the fund per year. No exceptions, no emergencies, no elections could change this rule ever. This is called the spending rule, and it saved Norway from itself. Because wealth isn't what you earn, it's what you don't spend today. The fund was designed with one purpose: protect Norway from becoming Venezuela. Let's compare Norway to Venezuela, a country with similar oil reserves back then. In 1970, Venezuela and Norway had similar populations and GDP per capita. Both were democracies. Both discovered oil. Both had similar economic starting points. By 2020, Norway's GDP per capita was $89,000, while Venezuela's was under $2,000. What happened in those 50 years to create this massive difference? Venezuela spent the oil money immediately on subsidies and infrastructure projects. They subsidized gas to 2 cents per liter for their citizens every day, paid for housing, food, and infrastructure across the entire country continuously. The economy grew rapidly, and people felt rich for the first time. Politicians were celebrated, re-elected, given more power to spend even more. Then oil prices dropped in the 1980s, and the money stopped flowing. But the spending didn't stop. It continued at the same exact pace. The government printed currency to cover the gap, and inflation began rising. By the 2000s, inflation was out of control, and savings evaporated completely. Today, Venezuela imports oil, despite having the largest reserves on Earth. It has oil beneath the ground and buys it from others. The country collapsed not because it lacked resources, but because it spent them. Now look at Norway during the 2008 financial crisis for comparison. The fund lost $75 billion in value as global markets crashed hard. Norway didn't panic, didn't sell, didn't touch the principal at all. It kept the 3% rule no matter what politicians or citizens demanded. By 2023, the fund held $1.7 trillion in total assets worldwide, enough to give every Norwegian citizen $300,000 if they distributed it today. But they don't, because the fund isn't for now or this generation. It's for when the oil runs out and Norway needs another income source. The fund is called the Government Pension Fund Global, and it's transparent. Every citizen can see exactly where the money is invested every single day. It owns 1.5% of all listed stocks in the world right now. Apple, Microsoft, Nestle, Toyota, thousands of companies across every sector and country. It's the largest sovereign wealth fund on Earth by total assets. And it exists because Norway was scared, not because it was smart. Here's what makes this hard for every country. Humans are terrible at delay. We see money and we spend it. We see wealth and distribute it immediately. Politicians get elected by promising more, not less, not later, more right now. Voters reward spending, not saving, especially when times are good and easy. Norway resisted this by removing the decision from human hands entirely and permanently. The fund is managed independently by Norges Bank Investment Management in Oslo. No politician can raid it for votes. No party can touch it. No emergency can override the rule. The system doesn't rely on discipline alone. It removes the need for it through design, not willpower or good intentions. This is the difference between control and constraint in real-life situations. Control requires willpower every single day. Constraint requires design that works automatically. Norway designed a system that couldn't be broken by human behavior or weakness. And that's why it worked when others failed completely and predictably. The spending rule isn't arbitrary, it's based on expected real returns over time. If the fund earns 3% above inflation, the principal never shrinks permanently. Norway can spend forever without depleting the fund for future generations ahead. This is sustainability, not in the environmental sense, but in the financial sense. Most governments operate on annual budgets that reset every single year. Norway operates on a perpetual fund that compounds across generations and centuries. Think about what this means for a normal Norwegian citizen today. They pay high taxes, some of the highest in the world actually. They don't get checks from the government. They don't see oil wealth daily. Life feels expensive. Winters are long. Everything costs more than elsewhere. But beneath the surface, they're protected in a way few nations are. When oil runs out in 20 or 30 years, Norway won't collapse. The fund will keep generating income, replacing what oil once provided completely. Their children and grandchildren will inherit stability, not debt or dependency. This is what intergenerational wealth actually looks like when done correctly. Compare this to how most individuals treat sudden wealth or windfalls today. Lottery winners go broke within 5 years. Athletes lose everything after retirement. Inheritance gets spent in 1 generation. Windfalls create more problems than solutions. Because humans aren't wired to handle abundance, we're wired to survive scarcity. Norway understood this at the national level and built guardrails accordingly. The fund also invests ethically, which is unusual for sovereign wealth funds. It doesn't invest in tobacco, certain weapons, or companies with poor practices. It divested from coal and oil companies to align with climate goals. This isn't just virtue signaling, it's long-term risk management done right. Companies that harm the planet won't be profitable in 50 years. Norway is thinking in decades, while others think in quarters and election cycles. The fund publishes annual reports. Anyone can read exactly what it owns. Full transparency, no secret deals, no hidden investments in authoritarian regimes. This level of openness is rare, and it builds trust with citizens. When people trust the system, they don't demand short-term spending. Other countries have tried to copy Norway's model with mixed results. Abu Dhabi has a sovereign wealth fund, so does Singapore and Kuwait. But none have Norway's discipline. None have the spending rule enforced so strictly. Because creating the fund is easy, not touching it is the hard part. Norway's success isn't replicable without the culture and systems that support it. It requires political consensus across parties, trust in institutions, long-term thinking. Most democracies can't sustain this, especially when voters demand immediate results. Norway had one advantage. They saw what happened to other oil nations first. They watched Venezuela, Nigeria, and others squander their wealth completely. That fear became policy. Policy became structure. Structure became compounding wealth. So here's the reframe that changes everything. Norway isn't rich because it found oil. It's rich because it treated oil like a problem, not a solution. A risk, a temptation, a resource that could destroy them if mismanaged badly. So they built a cage around it to protect themselves from themselves. Not to lock the money away, but to prevent their own destruction entirely. Most countries that find resources spend them immediately. Norway saved them instead. Most governments that gain revenue expand rapidly. Norway constrained itself deliberately. And now, decades later, the difference is permanent and irreversible between them. This is what margin of safety looks like at the national level. It's not about having more, it's about needing less from any single source. It's not about growth, it's about sustainability over decades and generations. Norway didn't get lucky. It got patient when others got greedy quickly. Other oil nations partied while Norway saved, and now the party's over. Saudi Arabia is trying to diversify, Russia is isolated, Venezuela collapsed. Norway just keeps compounding quietly while the world changes around it. The lesson isn't that every country should have a wealth fund. The lesson is that systems beat willpower every single time, without exception. Norway didn't rely on smart politicians or disciplined citizens to do the right thing. It created a system where the right thing was the only thing possible. You can apply this principle to your own life right now, today. Don't rely on discipline to save money. Automate it so you can't touch it. Don't trust yourself to invest wisely during a crash. Set rules beforehand. Don't assume you'll make good decisions under pressure. Remove the decision entirely. Norway's wealth fund is just a savings account with unbreakable rules. The magic isn't in the strategy, it's in the inability to break it. Wealth doesn't come from what you find, it comes from what you keep, and what you're willing to leave untouched for future generations to inherit. Norway understood that, not because they were smarter than other nations, because they were scared of what oil did to other nations before them, and determined not to let it happen to them, no matter what. That fear, turned into design, became the greatest wealth preservation system ever built. 5 million people did what empires couldn't do. They said no to free money. And that's why they're richer than they should be, richer than anyone expected. Welcome to Luxona, the Netflix of finance.